you go too far into this, and if you lose sight of the family or what's really important, like that can be tough to repair.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today is going to be a great day. I have a brand new guest that some of you probably have heard of and some of you may have not. His name is, on Twitter, it's the Tatted Trader, aka Craig. And Craig has a great story that I can't wait to share with you all. So Craig, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you having me. This is gonna be fun.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So for those who don't know who you are, tell us, man, what got you into the world of trading to begin with?
So I'm a little bit older than probably most guys we talk with or we see on Twitter, whatever. So I graduated college in 2008, and my degree was finance oriented. So I thought I was gonna be a finance guy, right, and get into the world of finance and trading and markets, and I've always had a passion for it even throughout school. Unfortunately for me, the timing was just absolutely couldn't have been worse, right? In my lifetime specifically, like the worst time ever to try to get into that. But I mean, I still went through with it, and I got a job out of college in 2008 at Wells Fargo, and thought I was on the right path and on top of the world and felt really good. Well, I got that job. It was like timelines get sketchy because I'm getting older, but it was like in between the Bear Stearns crash and the Lehman Brothers crash.
Okay.
So like I started at Wells Fargo after Bear Stearns crashed, and everybody's like, "Oh, Bear Stearns, that's going to make the markets more solvent." It calmed everybody down. 4 or 5 months into my job, Lehman Brothers gone, and then shortly after that, I'm gone. And then to get a job in finance at that point was, unless you wanted to be a bank teller, pretty much non-existent. And then what people don't even understand is even bank tellers in like 2008, 2009, 2010, there was like record bank closures, more than 2, 3 a month.
Jeez.
So you could be a bank teller and still lose your job. So finance was just, I just had to leave the game, so to speak, and go another route. And that's what I did.
That's crazy, man. And so you start in 2008, which for those who are not aware, I'm sure most are, but for those who aren't, there was a big market crash in 2008 related to real estate. And then you start into the whole career job, right? Working for Wells Fargo. And then another thing happens and you have to get let go, which is insane, man. But I want to ask you this, though. Because you said at the beginning that you kind of, always wanted to be in this finance. Like, why though? Like, what intrigued you about it? Like, what was there a moment in your life? Was there someone in your life? Was it just yourself one day exploring X? Like, what was it? Hey, we wouldn't be able to do these face-to-face interviews if it wasn't for our sponsor, Cobra Trading. So if you could just give them a few seconds of your time, we'd really appreciate it. Cobra Trading is the go-to broker for day traders and short sellers. And I'm not the only one saying this. In fact, Benzinga awarded Cobra Trading as the go-to broker for short selling. They have a heavy focus on direct market access order routing, so you have the fastest execution. They have some of the best locate prices and availability. They also have amazing customer service. I've experienced many different brokers, and it's why I use them every single day and why I'm proud to have them as our sponsor. Sign up now by clicking the Be the Trader referral link below and earn 1 free month of software with Cobra and 25% off all commissions. Now let's get back to the show.
So, I had a couple of family members that were somewhat into the markets, but to be completely honest with you, what really tilted me into that path was I took one class in college. I think it was my sophomore year, and it was a forecasting class related to the markets. And it was ultimately just, these complex, really long formulas using Excel and Access and all this type of stuff. And it was ways of using those formulas to try to find ways of making money in the markets. And I just was fascinated with that because I'm meticulous by nature. So Excel and doing stuff like that just kind of resonated with me. So after that, I kind of just really I hooked, for lack of a better word, right? And at that point, that was in 2005 or 6. And, now if you Google day trading, right, you're going to find articles galore, right? In 2005 and 6, it wasn't really a big thing, but, investing and all that was still a big thing. So plenty of information to still soak up then. but just a completely different ball game. But I mean, I was pretty much hooked after that class. So that one class really kind of changed it for me.
That's cool, man. I've heard that happen to a couple of people before. I've never experienced that. I never even heard of that class before, which is, man, that's cool, man. That's really lucky to be
It
part
might
of a
not even
class like that.
exist anymore. For all I, maybe forecasting now is like maybe Chat GPT and algos have killed forecasting. I don't know.
Well, I want to know though, like you lose your job, what happens next? Like you know, what do you do next?
So this was 2009 ish, somewhere in that ballpark. I had a job with a retail pharmacy company as an intern while I was in college.
Mm-hmm.
I was fortunate enough that they brought me back in a management type of role, and I was there ultimately from 2009 till about 2017, 18, somewhere in that ballpark. Um, I mean, I had to do something, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Finance was just not a thing. At this point, I'm an adult. I'm on my own, so I had to do something to pay my bills, feed, it just was me at this point. But I mean, I had to do something, and finance was just not a viable career path at that point in time. So retail pharmacy is where I was at, and probably for almost the next 10 years, roughly, give or take.
So you're in it now. Did you just completely forget about finance during that time period?
For about 3 years, yeah, really until about 2011, 2012. I just cut it out. I got pretty into the job that I had and really just focused on that, trying to grow that career and really just kind of put the markets and finance on the back burner ultimately. I mean, I even had a 401k through work, and in the past I was kind of meticulous with that type of stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I just put it in the ETF and was like, whatever. I didn't want to I just didn't have the desire. Say maybe 2013, maybe 2014, somewhere in that ballpark is where I started to kind of get back into it, because the market started to, I mean, at that point, they're already kind of rebounding and treading up. It's kind of when the nice bull market was really getting into its own. So that kind of caught my eyes. And then it was like, once I started, then I just never got back off.
Okay. And when did you, well, I'll get to that in a minute. So you started again like 2014, 15-ish.
Mm-hmm.
How do you start? Like, what do you do? Like, how do you even start to learn? Like, what did you do?
So at that point in time, one, I was scared because probably PTSD from the last
Yeah.
round, like what could happen again. So very slow and very steady. And again, even in 2014-ish, give or take, like, back then, if you Googled day trading or investing or whatever, you still got limited results. So I'm just Googling as much as I can. YouTube was, had tons of information, and then books. I read tons and tons and tons of books. I still had people who worked in the finance industry that I was trying to connect with and talk with and get put on the right path somewhere. But every path I was getting put on was longer term investing, ETFs, play it safe. There was no day trading talk really to be had that I was exposed to in 2014, 2015. That I didn't really start to get into that until closer to maybe the end of 2015, because it just wasn't as big as it is now, at least on the internet, for you to easily grab a hold of.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were really just learning more of like the longer term strategies, if you were. That's all you were really seeing.
Yeah, and just watching the markets as a whole, right? Like, I can't remember. I don't remember exactly when Robinhood came out, maybe 2016 or something. But pre-Robinhood, the phone apps for markets were abysmal. Like, they were really bad. So I had a laptop, and I would constantly be looking at things, or I would use whatever phone apps I had at the time. And then Robinhood did come along, and I thought their phone app was phenomenal just for quick scans of the markets and different stocks or whatever. And that's when the trading thing really took hold of, like, the internet, right? The world, the younger generations, I guess. Robinhood just changed everything, for better or worse. Like, people hate Robinhood, but I love it for what it did for the markets. But yeah, it was a slow journey. Like, I think I studied for almost a year or two before I even placed a single trade.
So let's talk about that then. So like right before you start to place your first day trade, did you just place your day trade like on a whim, like just like thinking, hey, this is what I like? Or was it like some kind of knowledge behind the trade that you've gained?
So when I first dove into day trading, it was primarily large caps.
Okay.
I was very ignorant to the whole small cap market. didn't even really look at that sector, never looked at anything that people hadn't heard of, right? Like these small cap companies, we've never heard of any of them.
Right.
So I didn't trade anything like that, no instruments like that. What changed it for me as far as small caps, and I think probably everybody's going to have similar story or the same thing, but I don't know how old Trading Tickers one is. I may have watched it around the time it came out, but that changed everything for me. Because I kind of knew who Grittani was at that point in time, and Michael Good, and they were, some of the earlier success stories from the Sykes gang and stuff like that. But those two were very meticulous.
Yeah.
Good in particular was very data driven and really tried to dig into stuff, and that resonated well with me. And Grittani was the same type of way. So they really got me into more of the small cap things. And both of those would say they felt like they were trading market inefficiencies. And that triggered, I think, something early on in me, because like the forecasting thing, we were hunting for market inefficiencies. That's ultimately what we were doing with these stupid, long, complex formulas. We were hunting for inefficiencies based on data, and they were kind of doing the same thing, but their whole trading revolved around market inefficiencies. And I just loved that. And I really dove into it from, I think it was about 2015-ish, when I really, 16, somewhere in that ballpark, when I really went down that rabbit hole.
Okay. So you really got dived in with Tim Grittani's really Trading Tickers, which is a phenomenal, probably one of the best at that time for sure when it came out. Probably still one of the best, to be honest. It's amazing.
It's my favorite one ever.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen a better piece of material around small caps specifically than that.
Yeah, I have to agree. That doesn't make you you feel like you get everything, which is really great.
Right.
So you watch that, and then what? Like you just start becoming profitable right away? Like what happens?
Oh God, no. So this was 2016, 2015. Again, the timeline gets sketchy. Once you have kids, man, everything just gets cloudy.
When did you have your kids?
So my oldest she'll be 13 in a couple months, and then I have an 8-year-old.
Oh, awesome.
I had kids at this point.
Okay.
Which prolonged the journey, right? Because you got to balance life and family and my own job and studying and whatever.
Yeah, because you're working right now.
Yes.
You have kids.
Yes.
You find Tim Grittani, and you're like, where were you 10 years ago?
Right. Because, yeah, man, it was tough. So, no, definitely not profitable. The first 2 years, probably. Just up and down, in and out. But I was trading so small, right? And
Absolutely.
I know I touched on this with you before, but because I had kids, because I had a wife, I could not just throw heavy money into the markets. Like my wife at the time, different periods, but at some point she was working, at some point she was pregnant. She eventually she went back to get her bachelor's, and then she went to PA school. So there were times when she wasn't even working. So I had to be very careful with trading, because we've seen the horror stories, right? People losing tons of money in the blow ups, and I just could not do that. So there would be times I would literally trade with 10 shares or 100 shares just to learn a process, just to focus on the percent gains, how well I executed, because I just couldn't afford to do more than that. Like it was too scary. So for a year, I did that. Super small. If I made $100 on a trade, I'm like, that's awesome.
Absolutely.
Right? 'Cause I was trading so small. Year 2, I'm starting to put up a little more money, and the losses become a little bigger.
Yep.
But still kind of learning the process. So it took me a good few years before I, 1, gained confidence, and 2, where my wife was in a spot where she was, working, and I guess I had a little more capital to utilize for trading and actually to try to make a go of it. But it was a long process. I would say at least 3 years, starting about 2015. So maybe 2018, I'm looking at a more solid equity curve, maybe even going into 2019, which is, when the hot markets really
started to come. Yep. So what kind of account size did you start with? I'm very curious. Even though you're risking small, I'm very curious what you started with.
Cash account, probably 5,000, give or take.
And did you
PDT rule?
Yep. And did you grow it, or did you had saved up money and add to it later once you had consistency, so you could start risking more and getting there faster? What was your plan there?
So to be honest,
Yeah.
I never took a 5K account and grew it over PDT just organically because I just did not want to trade under PDT. So I had,
Yep.
when my
I
wife
feel
was
you.
working and then finally get into trading a little heavier, I just had money saved up to where I could put it in an account and be over PDT. Still wouldn't utilize all the capital, right? I
That's why
could
I
be
like
on a
you. Yep.
yeah, I could be on a, let's just say 30K, 40K account. That doesn't mean I'm utilizing even a fifth of that, you
Yep.
know? Like
You're still risking $10, $20, $50, like trying
yeah,
to get your edge up, trying to get your confidence, which is
exactly.
why I asked that question because I was hoping you did start with a bigger account because a lot of people don't hear this and a lot of people do start with a bigger account. Like they'll save and they'll just slowly stack and then add to it when they're ready. Sometimes they're not ready, but what you did is you added to it and then you still risk small, which is so important. And because it's not about money, it's about percentage, it's about process.
Right.
So after you started to find, because you mentioned something that was very interesting, you said, I started to find something that works for me. Then I started to get confidence. I like how you separated that. So explain that. Like, what was it that you found worked for you? And then I'll ask you the next part. What was it that you found worked for you?
So that's the thing, right? Like you can find something that works for you, but then the market conditions can make that not work for you. So in 2018, what was working for me was more of long based strategies. I didn't really do much of any shorting until closer to 2020. And in 2018 and 2019, I'm largely trading OTCs on the long side.
Hmm.
Well, towards the end of 2019, 2020 specifically, like OTCs kind of started just dying, right?
Yeah.
And that did shake my confidence a little bit because either I was not having trades for maybe a week at a time or longer when I felt like I needed to trade. So I had to change everything. Like OTCs just weren't as viable. So I had to start learning small caps. And of course, small caps at this point in time, I had been watching, but I just wasn't actively trading when the OTC market was so hot. Like I had my niche, I lived there, I was fine with it. So I didn't really care about the listed stuff so much. Well, in 2020, I had to start really diving in and learning listed stuff on a much higher level. And that's when I started to get more into short selling, which sounds crazy because 2020, everything just kept going up. But, that's where the market inefficiencies come into play and, waiting for the right time. But yeah, I mean, what was working, it's a constant adaptation, right? Like what works for us now, or at least for me, maybe didn't work in 2020 or 2019 or especially before that because I used to be so long biased. 2017, 2018, I think I was all long biased, very few shorts.
That's interesting because what really got you going is like Tim Grittani, watching that, and he's more short bias. So how did you go from learning from that? How did you take that information and apply it to a long OTC trader?
Right.
And
like
and were you trading breakouts? I'm assuming.
Yeah, breakouts and dip buys on OTCs, first
Okay.
green days, those were, I mean, in 2019, you could buy a first green day on an OTC, wake up the next morning to a 50% gap, like
It's nuts. It was
four
nuts.
times a week. Like it was insane.
I sucked at it though, but it was nuts. I
Man,
saw that all the time. I was like, God damn.
it was crazy, dude. Like, I mean, every other day you had a 50% gap on an OTC. But at the time, especially 2016, 17, I'm trading on a small cash account.
Yep.
And I didn't have a specialized broker like, we got Cobras today, we got Guardian, Center Points, etc. So I'm trading primarily with Thinkorswim or E-Trade, especially
Yep.
with OTCs because it's just a one flat fee, right? So I knew I didn't really I couldn't short the way he was shorting with the current account I had. So that's where like, some reverse engineering came into play and he had a couple long strategies or I watched a couple webinars. And also I did learn a lot from other people in his circle that back in the day would do these webinars. And a lot of those guys were trading OTCs in 2019 because they were so hot, 2018 even. But his videos alone, and I don't know if it gets enough credit for this, but his videos also just gave me a big, I guess, insider edge maybe into like psychology because he was very patient, right? He had his trade, he had his targets, he had his stops, and he just would get in and he would just sit back, right? Like hands off. So I really started adapting that mentality too, especially with OTCs, especially on those first green days. Because I remember, I think it was 2018. I wouldn't hold overnight, right? And then I'd wake up, and it'd be a 60% gap. I'd be like, damn, like, but I kept doing that and doing that and doing that. And finally, like 2018, 19, somewhere in that ballpark, I started getting more patient and start gapping these things and catching these crazy overnight moves where you'd wake up seriously to 50%, like every day. Like it was just insane. Like I would love another OTC hot market, but I don't know. We'll see what happens. But his video for me, I guess, so a lot of just patience and somewhat of a psychology piece that I think gets overlooked on his DVDs, but just the waiting game and just knowing what your setups are, being patient. Because he just made it sound like he was like, one, I don't have to trade every day.
Yep.
Two, like if my setup's not there, I'm not gonna fool with it. And you know, fortunately, in the 2018, 19 markets and so on and so forth, the setups presented themselves frequently. But he was definitely a huge piece of my journey on multiple different fronts for multiple different reasons.
So you also mentioned that there was times that, you know, there got to a point when you were trading OTCs where it started to get dry, and there was like a week where you make no trade. Were you disciplined? Were you that type of trader where you just didn't trade if it wasn't there at that time? Or, you know, tell me about that. Just curious. Or did you fall into some kind of like drawdown because of the dryness? Like what happened?
So I've always had a pretty patient. I don't think I've ever really over traded too many times in my career. I can hone in on one time more recently, and that was this year in March during the bank stuff, right? It was very circa 2008 to some degree. I was trading everything every day for like 2 months. It was ridiculous. I mean, but anyway, no, outside of that moment in time, no, I'm normally pretty patient. Like if my setup doesn't present, I'm okay. Like there were multiple days in the last couple months where it's just certain days I just don't trade.
Yeah.
But I've always kind of had that mentality into, and I think experience, and this may sound bad, but like for newer traders, right? You feel like you have to trade every day to make money. Like you feel like if you're not pushing buttons, you're not at your screens, you're not placing trades, like you're just not doing a good job. So for me, especially in 2018, that was a very good lesson to learn. Is some of my better months were months when I had less trades, but I was fortunate enough to where I could see that happen time and time again over the course of many, many months. Because for newer traders, if you see that once or twice, you're like, okay, whatever. But if you were able to see that over the stretch of time, it can just play such a huge difference. But for so many, they just don't have enough time in this to really understand that, like, sometimes in a given month, 4 or 5 good trades can literally make your whole month.
Oh, dude, it can make your year.
Yeah, like March for me this year during that bank stuff has almost been a third of my entire year.
Yep. Dude, it's not uncommon. Like we'll talk to people who do make their entire year off of one trade. Like they'll make their entire year, like they weren't doing bad. They just somehow found a trade that worked tremendously well. And that's the other thing. Like we don't know which one's going to work well at all. Like you just gotta, you know, be in it and have patience. Like you said earlier, like let your plan play out. But I want to ask you this too, man. Like how long did it take you to transition from OTC to NASDAQ? Because that's for those who are not aware, OTC is over-the-counter stocks, pink sheets. They trade much differently. The montage, which is level 2, is very, very slow. It's very, very easy to catch things because it's someone on the other end of the table executing your orders. Whereas with NASDAQ, it's a whole different ball game. So was that an easy transition for you?
Not at all, because what you just said 100% is, for me, the nail on the head. A big part of my edge, I felt like, with OTCs was, you know, reading the tape. But it was so much easier to read because it was slower. I felt it was cleaner. I felt the tape and the moves were generally just cleaner. You didn't have these crazy, like, fake breakouts or fake breakdowns, fake halts, you know, and then, like, you didn't have all that. Wasn't a thing. So huge learning curve. And, you know, a lot of people, it was like 2020 was their best year ever, right? They killed it. And you see that, right, on Twitter, YouTube, everywhere, right? 2020 for me was not as good as 2019. Like 2019 was phenomenal for me. 2020 was more of an adjustment period.
Yep.
And it was a little shaky because I didn't do as well as I did in 2019 because of that adjustment. But I just
Were you full time during that period? When did you go full time, by the way?
2019
2019. Okay.
ish,
Okay.
give or take, somewhere in
Okay.
that ballpark.
So you
Again,
were full time then in 2020.
yeah. So 2020, or maybe at the beginning of 2020, somewhere in that ballpark. But either way, 2020 was definitely something that shook my confidence
Yeah.
because either I was full time at that point, or I had just went full time, or was getting ready to. So I think I was full time at that point. But huge adjustment in 2020, and it did shake my confidence because I felt like I just had to relearn everything. Because the level two
Mm.
on these listed stocks is,
Oh, dude, they're good luck.
yeah, like
Well, I
sometimes it's
mean,
completely
good
useless.
luck if you're coming from OTCs with the same
Right,
mindset. Good luck.
right.
Like you can do it, but good luck.
Yeah, and some of these candles, man, like even, I would even try to slow it down, right? I don't try. So typically I trade off 2 minute candles. Done that with OTCs, do it with listed. But when I first came to list, I was like, let me put on 5 minute candles and maybe these things won't be so wicky. Like, no, still just ridiculous in 5 minute candle. Like, so huge adjustment. 2020, especially the first half, it took me a good while to find my rhythm. Um, but for the first 3, 4 months of 2020, I'm still long biased. I'm listed, and I just wasn't having success. And
Yeah.
then I started to go more on the short side of things and start digging into more Gatani stuff, rewatch Trading Tickers 1, really hone in on some of his stuff and some of the stuff around the Trading Tickers stuff. So I felt like I had to relearn everything. Got more on the short side and started having much more success. Much more.
So so you're doing well in OTC world. I'm assuming you hit a certain size, which is not important, but like you're trading a certain size. Did you downsize when you transitioned? Did you like how
Not
did
at
you go
first.
through that? Okay, explain that.
Not at
Like,
first. Yeah.
okay.
So I'm very systematic with my sizing, with my risk. Always pretty much have been. And that was something that I've, even back in 2008, that was so everybody at Wells Fargo, everybody's boss was a risk manager,
Okay.
right? So that's just something, risk management is just ingrained in me from whatever. So my sizing and risk has always been fairly systematic, but my account had grown going into 2020, right? So I'm trading with bigger size than I should have based on this systematic risk and position sizing that I'm used to trading on. So I'm just taking these rather large losses time and time and time and time again. And my win rate was just plummeting. Success rate was just, confidence was shook. It was all bad. So I did have to size down.
Yep.
That was a hard lesson for me because,
What'd you do? Like half, tenth down, tenth. I actually had to size down a tenth of the
I was
size.
going to say,
It was a lot.
for a while, it was a quarter.
Okay. Yep.
A quarter of a size because it was so bad. And I really did have to kind of relearn some stuff, which is another reason why the whole confidence thing kind of got shook, right?
Yep.
I'm not winning like I used to. I'm sized down, so my gains are therefore smaller. Of course, my losses are smaller in turn too. But yes, in that transitionary period, that was one thing I wish I could have done different, was size down from the get go,
Yeah.
because that was a huge mistake that like cost me more money than it should have, just from a simple sizing thing that like
Yeah.
I just overconfidently overstepped.
So you start to find your edge in small caps. And what is your edge? Like, if you have to describe it now, like in small, you still trade small caps, I'm assuming.
Still on small cap, still 90% short biased.
And that's so funny. I go from all long bias to now short bias. So like what would you say like, your main edge is in short selling?
So it's more mean reversion, right? Like, and I'm not trying to catch the top. I'm not a top hunter. I'm more of trying to build positions, or be somewhere where I feel like that mean reversion is, and getting my position. And usually, I don't always set a range order. I
Yeah.
do love range orders. I don't want to
I
set them.
love them, bro.
Same. Sometimes, especially on day ones that can be quick or have those wiki moves, I won't set a range order, but it's still in my mind, right? Before I enter a trade, I always have a stop and I always have a target, and I position size accordingly. So ultimately, yeah, most of my trades revolve around mean reversion. Um, I know you talked to Sellers not too long ago. He got me trading his parabolic setups. So I love parabolics, which is still kind of a short-term mean reversion type of thing, like very quick.
Yeah.
But yeah, ultimately
That's probably why you like it. It's probably because it's kind of like familiar.
fits in, right? So
Yep.
instead of, because most of my thing, like day ones, I'll trade day one gappers. I know some people hate them. I
I
like day
love
one
them.
gappers. Day twos, I've always loved day twos, but I feel like they're gone, right? Like I just don't see
I
them.
suck at it, so I don't know.
Yeah, they use so like last year day twos, I had tons of success with day twos because these things would have this day one gap and they would either hold up or gap down going into day two, but still even on the gap down, they'd still be up 60-70% on their initial move. So it just still had a lot of meat left on the bone. I don't feel like we see that as much anymore. Um, Everybody says first red day, and I know it's a very broad statement because everybody has a different definition of first red day. I have mine, and I still trade that when it presents. Again, not seeing those as much, but ultimately, yeah, mean reversion. The some of my best trades this year were the bank stuff, because that was I don't want to say exactly like '08, but it was I haven't seen anything like that since '08. But I got on some of that stuff early,
Yeah.
which could have been bad, I guess, technically, if like the
You
news ended
shorted,
up
I'm
being
assuming?
all of them.
Oh, good for you, bro. See, well, I love what you're saying. Go ahead, finish what you're saying. Go ahead.
No, I mean, so that was shorted all the bank stocks. I don't know. First red days, I know I got off track, but I guess news. I'll trade news, right?
Hmm.
So when the bank stuff hit in March, and then I think it hit again in May or June. And I can't remember which month it was, but that was my second best month this year because we had round two. Like I think SIVB was first, and then we had FRC or FHC, whatever that
Yep.
ticker was.
I forgot. First Republic.
Yes, so FRC. But those were some of my best trades this year, and yeah, I shorted every linked bank I could get my hands on in that period of time.
You know what? I love that you said that because you're bringing back your history and you're bringing back what you learned and saw that time. And you brought that, what you like, you might have not known what you learned until now. And you're like, oh, I
Yeah.
remember this. Oh, I know what could happen. And then you have a thesis and you played it. So that's really cool, man. I appreciate you sharing that.
No, yeah. I talked to sellers about that actually, and was like, man, like after Bear Stearns, they said everything was good, right? After SIVB, they're like everything's good. I was like, it's not good. Like it's not good in dominoes.
Interesting. So I need to know this though, because we kind of glazed over at the beginning, or you mentioned somewhere in the middle about kids, wife, marriage, because you have probably like 70, I don't know, a ton of people, let's just say half people who don't have kids, are not married, and they're diving into trading, like the Jack Kellogg, stuff like that, and they have all the time in the world. Then you have the people who have kids and maybe they're babies, Please explain how you dealt and how you handled learning to be a trader during that process. And I'd love to know, because I know people are trying to do that now and they're probably scratching their head like, man, I always see these people on the show who don't have kids, So very curious.
So the first thing I would say to anybody that has kids and they're trying to get in this game or early into this game is like, you've got to be patient. Like, so I started getting back into trading roughly 2014, 2015. Didn't even find profitability until 2018. But that's because I had kids, right? So my study time is heavily, imposed. I got two kids, or at one point maybe one kid, but either way, I got kids, right? And I got a wife. Those are priority one, no question, right? So if something has to be done, or that I just need to be with them, then that's what has to happen. And that is an ongoing struggle, even now. But 100%, like you have to be patient, because I think if you, I talk with a lot of guys that I trade with, or friends that I trade with, or people I've met. Like for me, and they all hopefully know this. Like balance is huge for me. And I know I think you and I have talked before. I'm like, I usually take off every Wednesday. Or if my kids are getting into sports now, right? Or they have maybe after school stuff. And I won't hesitate to take a day off from the markets. Whereas sometimes in 2018, 2019 specifically, I got too far into this, right?
Yep.
And family stuff did suffer a bit. right? Or maybe some stuff
Yep.
with my wife was, I just was too dug into the wrong stuff. So balance is huge. And I would just say, honestly, like never lose sight of that, because that is, you can't, you go too far into this. And if you lose sight of the family or what's really important, like that can be tough to repair. And how old's your son?
Okay, so you're gonna bring me out of me.
He's young, right?
So no one ever knows this. So yeah, so I have a son. He's 5 months old right now. So
Yeah,
yes.
and I didn't mean to put you
Yeah.
on the spot. I'm sorry.
No, it's
but
all
I'm just
good.
gonna say,
I'll have to
like,
announce it now before this episode goes out.
oh, okay, sorry.
No, I was gonna do it anyway. So
Okay.
go ahead.
So when your kids are young, man, and you're gonna learn this, but that time goes by so fast. And in 2019, so my son was born in 2015. God, I hope I'm getting that date right. 2015. He was born in 2015, right? So in 2018, 2019, when I'm really finding an edge and a stride and I'm doing really well, my son is 3.
He's running around.
But to be honest with you, like I feel like I missed a lot
I gotcha.
because I was so locked in. And I hate that. And that is something, despite how well I did in the markets, I do regret. So like going forward, I'm not going to make that mistake twice.
Yep.
So like balance for me is so, so huge. And that's another reason I respect guys like, Gritani,
Yep.
Roland Wolf, a lot of guys that I know and talk to, like they are 100% okay with just not being here because their kids or something is going on. Right. So like balance is huge, and patience. My God, if you don't have patience with kids and trading, you just ain't gonna make it on either front. Right. Like you've got to be patient.
You
This is a
have to
long
be.
game.
So, even though you had kids and you were married, it took you about 3 years. But I honestly, God, think now that I'm in that situation, because I never understood. And I think now, like, if I had my son when I first started learning, oh my goodness, I am reckoned to say, you have to double the amount of time it's going to take you, because it's hard to like get something in when you need to be here too. It's hard to like really focus when you also need to be here too, unless you just ignore, like you said. If you do that, then I'm glad you gave that warning. Like, that's hard to repair. And so, I hats off to everyone who is trying to learn this. But if you are, and you have a son, a daughter, brand new marriage, like just know, like the markets will be here forever.
Forever.
And you know what? Don't. I know you probably came to this world because you want to leave your job or something, but at the end of the day, like, make that money, get that regular income, learn this as you go, and then over time, one day it can take over. But don't worry about rushing it.
Right, because I was patient on the, I didn't leave my job immediately. I didn't leave my job after 1 year of profitability.
I love that you say that.
I had my kids, so everything was. Unfortunately, my wife was very supportive through all this.
Oh yeah,
I was very fortunate with that because, if I'm trying to study and we got a toddler running around, good luck, right?
yeah.
So a lot of times she would, she would help me out or I would help her. It was communication was huge between us. It had to be on point because, she's trying to go through school. I'm essentially kind of going back to school, trying to learn this trade. Very tough, man. But it was a long game and a patient game because, whether it's leaving the job or trying to learn, especially when you have kids, like you can see all the, success stories, I guess you call them, where people become profitable and make a bunch of money, especially in 2020, man.
Yeah, they were everywhere.
And that, even for me in 2020, I'm seeing that, right? And I'm struggling in 2020 and I'm seeing these success stories. So that kind of even shook me a little bit. I'd been doing it for a while at that point. But fortunately, patience, perseverance. But yeah, it was a long game for sure. And to anybody that has kids or even doesn't, like, you have to be patient. You rush into this, you're gonna lose money real quick.
You are, and I think Benjamin Franklin says comparison is what is it? Comparison will always ruin your happiness, or comparison is like the evil of happiness, or like the opposite of happiness that always ruins it. And dude, like that's I've been through that several times, especially as a trader. We're very competitive.
Yep.
And when we see someone who comes up the ranks, and I've been in it, let's say I've been in 3-4 years, and they in their first year and just destroying it, it can get into you, and it did me, and it sounds like it did you for a little bit too. But I think as you trade longer and longer, like you get to a point where you're like, you start to be comfortable with yourself, and then you start to be like happy for everyone else, which is so weird. I mean, like that was a transition for me. I don't know if you've experienced that, but that was like, I used to be like, why is he doing better and I'm not? But then over time it became, oh, badass. Like I could do that too. You know, like it's kind of
Oh, for
like that
sure.
now. So it's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, some guys that I trade with that, are really doing this and, stuff like that. Like if I see them do well, like hell yeah. Like I'm super happy for them because I know how hard this is, right? This is so freaking hard. So if you have some success, like man, absolutely some like celebrate that. Because you're right, I'm uber competitive by nature. Have been my whole life. Played sports forever. So if I went through that, right? If I see somebody
Yep.
doing better than me, I'm like, what the hell? Like why? What are
Yep.
they doing? Like what am I, and it just makes you fortunately I got out of that and then this makes me sound old too, but as I got older, that went away a little bit too.
Yep.
But when I was younger, man, yeah, that was a struggle
Yeah,
for sure.
100%. So speaking of struggle, before we start to wrap this up, I do want to hit you with a couple of questions, and that is like, what was your biggest weakness in your trading game, especially in the beginning of your journey? That was like the biggest factor that impacted you, whether it was financially or something. I'm very curious about that.
Yeah, so I would say it's kind of two pronged. I guess on a more technical side, I struggle with just being wrong, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't hold a loser. I would quickly cut the loser, but then I'd re-enter, right? Death by a thousand paper cuts.
Hey, what do they always say? You can always get back in.
Yeah,
Because
and
I
I
feel
would.
like, yeah.
Like I would. I was gonna be right eventually, but damn, if I wasn't gonna be wrong 27 times before I was right and be right on the trade, right?
Yep.
So learning to be wrong was a struggle on the technical side. On the more personal side, and this is something I still struggle with now. My wife works full time. She's a medical provider, right?
Yep.
It's a tough job. I got two kids, both young. I'm home all day, right? So I still sometimes struggle with trying to do this on a high level and do it well, but I also feel this just overarching need to like maintain the household, right? Kids got doctor's
Yep.
appointments, I need to take them. After school
Yeah.
stuff, I need to go. House needs to be clean, laundry, whatever. I got to do it. Like, wife's working, right? Tough job. I don't want her to have to come home and deal with all that. So I
Yep.
try to handle as much as I can in the household on top of trading. And that can be tough. Sometimes I will make rush decisions because I'm like, I got to be off this desk
Oh,
by
dude,
11
I
because I need to do A,
know.
B, and C, right? And in those scenarios, I probably shouldn't trade. But I'm like, that seems like a pretty good setup. When in reality, it's like a D setup. And I'm like, let me just hit it real quick before I got to run to the kids'
Yeah.
school or whatever.
Yeah.
But I've always struggled with that. I mean, really ever since I got back into this, because I feel like I need to maintain the trading world, and I need to maintain like my household, my family, whatever, and try to take off as much off of my wife's plate as I can, maybe. So that's a struggle that I still have today, and
Mm.
sometimes finding that balance can be tricky. But that's also part of the reason why this year in particular, maybe towards the end of last year, mid last year, started taking off every Wednesday,
Mm.
which has been for me awesome. And I don't
Why
have a lack of it.
Wednesday?
Right in the middle of the week. I know we talked about that before, and you're like, you should make it a 3 day weekend. I was like, it's not a bad idea, but right in the middle of the week, right? I don't know, like
I don't know if your stats had anything to do with it or
no, it's
no.
nothing stat wise. Actually, Friday's probably my worst
That's what I'm
day.
saying. Like
I should
Friday's
maybe take
probably the
off Friday.
hardest. Yeah.
But Wednesdays just it's right in the middle of the week. Gives me 2 days to go hard, break 2 days to go hard. Because sometimes on the weekends, kind of go both ways. Sometimes on the weekends I'll dig into spreadsheets or stats or review or journaling or whatever, and then sometimes I'm doing stuff with them or kind of mixture of both. But Wednesday is like a day when I can just focus on. If kids got doctor's appointments, I always schedule them on Wednesdays. This whiteboard that I got here beside me, people think it's like for trading. It's not. It's for like to dos and reminders because
Yeah.
kids and I got a vet appointment. I got a kid's doctor's appointment. Do this, run this errand. Like, so keeping that balance is still a struggle for me. But the every Wednesday thing off thing for me has been awesome.
Mm. Cool. Cool. So, what about now, man? Like, what are you really trying to focus on right now to whether it's improve your trading in some ways or something you're trying to learn, or something you're trying to get rid of?
So actually, I've had some conversations with my wife about this. I know you and Sellers have talked, and Sellers is like one of the guys I talk to probably the most about trading. Um, Kind of twofold here with this. Like, one, I still need to get comfortable. I've been doing this a while, right? And I still struggle with taking like some every sizing for everybody's relative, right?
Yeah,
For
it's
everybody, that's
100%
all
is.
relative. But for me, trying to size up based on the percent of my account, as the account grows, sometimes I still struggle to take that jump up to bigger size. And even though I don't watch my P&L, I position size so meticulously that like if I'm up or down on a trade, I know what my P&L looks like roughly, right? I mean, I
Yep.
can take it off my screens and hide it and not watch it, but I know what it looks like in the back of my mind. So sometimes sizing up that still kind of psychs me out to some degree because I found this comfort level that I do well with and is beneficial for me and the family and A, B, and
Yep.
C. But so that jump up to the next level, sizing wise, can be, I don't know, just still messes with my head despite the amount of time I've been doing this. So that's one that I do need to work on. And two, like, I love trading, right? I love it. And I would love to do it for a long period of time. Would I love to be here every day for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week? Absolutely not. So I am looking to get better at some of the longer term stuff, like some longer term just holds in my own money market accounts or mutual
Yep.
funds or whatever, and be a little more hands on with that, and let that grow so I can be here less and do other things more. But yes, I would still obviously love to trade, just maybe not have to do it so frequently and, be like, all right, I need to get back at the screen so I can make some money so we can eat some food. You know what I mean? Like just kind of a different mindset, right? So I would like to improve the longer term stuff and be
Yeah.
more involved in that and then be here a little less. But yes, also on the trades I am here and present to take, I would like to start sizing up on those on a higher level.
I'm just curious, have you made a plan to solve number one, sizing up? Like, have you made a new plan to do that? Because you said you talked with your wife about it. Like, have you developed some type of plan for yourself?
I feel like I have a plan, right? Like, because I am pretty systematic with sizing and risk and stuff like that. So like, I know I can size up X, and risk this and ultimately be okay. I just have to follow through. It's just a psychology, like just a
Yeah.
mind thing, right? And I got to break through that and just freaking do it. But I think I might be more apt to do that once I get some of the longer term stuff going
Hmm.
and have that going maybe on a better track to where I don't have to be here as much. And then maybe if I'm trading less and truly only taking A setups, right? Then maybe, because I feel like for the last month, like I don't feel like I've had a lot of trades where I'm like, damn, that was a really good setup and a really good trade.
Yep.
For me and how I trade, like the last month or so has been a little rocky. Um, and that's just, adapting to the markets too. But yeah, I mean, if I can truly get into some what I feel are A setups, then yes, I would like to start sizing up for sure. But it's here, man.
Oh yeah. I mean, we won't get into that now, but that's like the whole game. So, and people could argue with me all day. I completely believe that's like, okay, I would say at least 50-50, but like at the end of the day, like, yeah, you need the mindset to do anything. So
Yeah, it's like once you get to a certain level, right?
yeah,
Technical analysis, you can't do a lot more. Fundamental, you can't do much more. And then it's just a mind game. Like so I agree with you. Like once you get to a certain point,
it's all
that's it.
here. It's all here. Well, look, Craig, man, it's been great talking to you, learn about your story. And I know people are going to be like, hey man, how do I get a hold of you? How can I reach out to you? So can you take a second and let people know?
Yeah, so like you said at the beginning, at Tatted Trader Guy on Twitter. I always got to think about that. I made that like in 2015 or 2012, and then disabled it and brought it back when people didn't have tattoos so much. Now everybody's got them, and anybody I see trading is like sleeved out. Now I'm over here with like a half a sleeve and a few. But anyway, yes, Tatted Trader Guy at Twitter. I got a Discord, room that me and Sellers are, we chop it up in on the daily. But yeah, Twitter's the best way to get a hold of me for sure.
Awesome. Well, look, Craig, I appreciate you, brother, today. And again, we'll talk soon, bro.
All right, man. Appreciate you.